Joe Cowley calls out Acme, the Bulls front office, over their draft history since taking over the Chicago Bulls. We're also going to talk about some of the biggest concerns surrounding Dalen Terry after Summer League going into the season. And then lastly, we're also going to jump into the mailbag. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you can follow the show at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform that we're on. Now, getting into the content for today, I do want to talk about this article from Joe Cowley talking about the Bulls draft history. And while I don't always agree with Joe Cowley, I think he's a bit of a hack at times, but I do, sometimes agree with his articles. And he is tapped in. He's been with the Chicago Sun-Times for a while. And this article was really kind of mind-opening in a lot of ways. And yes, it was woulda, coulda, shoulda, which is always going to be played, especially when it comes to draft, right? There very rarely does any team not have a player that they can look at and say, well, hell, if we would have drafted this player, look at how things would have been different. It factors into most draft selections of the draft, even if for teams that do get solid players. But it is a little bit even more concerning when it comes down to what's going on with the Chicago Bulls in this case, right? And so looking at this article, it really breaks down and gives grades over the Bulls' 4 drafts since AK's taken over. And they start off, of course, in 2020 with Patrick Williams and also getting Marko Simonovic in the second round. And so he graded that as a C, but then when you look at some of the players that were drafted after that, right, after that area, that's where it starts getting a little bit more concerning as well. Everybody knows and has made the point of the Tyrese Halliburton and how different this team could have looked had the Bulls drafted Halliburton at that spot rather than drafting Patrick Williams. And, that's always going to be something that's around, right? Keep in mind, had the Bulls drafted Halliburton, not had it, then signed Lonzo Ball, with that money could have went elsewhere. And then maybe at that point, you get a point guard around Lauri Markkanen. Maybe he gets the most out of Lauri. Like, of course, those questions are always, always, always going to be there. And you have to, pay some respect to that. And the fact of the matter is while Patrick Williams, I still think has a lot of upside, especially defensively and as the shooting comes around, I'd be remiss in not being honest if I did not say that I have not thought about what the difference would have looked like with having Halliburton there instead of Patrick Williams. Like, it's one of the biggest draft what ifs in Chicago Bulls recent history for sure, right? And, we'll see. Patrick Williams, especially, like, does he win the starting job? I have a video out on that from last week, like, asking, is Patrick Williams even going to, be the starting power forward? I think he should, and I hope that he comes in with the mindset to get that. But at the end of the day, you have some worries about that. And Patrick Williams was the first draft selection by this new front office. And while I'm not down on Pat, I'm not one of those guys who's gonna try to write the story and say, oh, Pat Williams is not this, he's never gonna be this. He's a 21-year-old kid who is still figuring it out. But that is part of why we have those problems. And some people look at it as what they do is that, hey, it's a big still what if. What if he's going to unlock that aggression? What if he starts being more consistent? What if he starts taking more shots? Things like that. There's a lot of things that go into where Patrick Williams is. So a lot of it's on him and his mentality, and some of it is on how he's used as well, and having a coaching staff that has not really prioritized his development. So, that's how I kind of look at it. Now, when it comes to Ayo Dosunmu, I think they did a damn good job at Ayo Dosunmu. I know that it's like Bulls fans have really turned around on Ayo. Since he had a down sophomore year, but at the end of the day, the way it is that I look at Ayo. Most second round picks don't make it, and with Ayo, we got a player who in his rookie year was one of the best guard defenders in the league. Now, yes, he stepped down, and shout out to local Bulls fan as well. Y'all go and check him out on Twitter. He had this whole thread talking about like Ayo Dosunmu's numbers and how, they weren't as bad as what people would think. But again, you still have to pair the stats with watching the game. And Ayo's confidence seems like it definitely took a hit over the course of the season. And so hopefully Ayo, he gets that confidence back. He gets used in a more natural role to him. I think coming off the bench, especially if he learns to be that change of pace point guard, setting the tone defensively, could definitely help him a lot. But hey, I don't really look at players that went after Ayo as being too hugely above him either. I do think that the shortcoming with Ayo Dosunmu is only giving him a 2-year deal to where now we're dealing with him in restricted free agency this early on, and he may take the qualifying offer and hit back to restricted free agency next year. Next up, Dalen Terry, 2002 pick, taken 18th overall. And of course, if you guys go back and look at my draft coverage over that time, I was extremely high on Walker Kessler. I was extremely high on him, and that's not revisionist history. It's out there in the ether. Please go and look at it. I thought that Walker Kessler would have been the perfect pick for the Chicago Bulls, being at that number 18 spot, especially considering he went 22nd 4 spots later. You could have developed your starting center of the future. Who knows? We would have even spent the money to retain Nikola Vucevic this year. Yes, Walker Kessler is not the scorer Vooch is. Walker Kessler is a hell of a defender, shot blocker, and rebounder. He's more traditional in that sense, but even how he can defend in the pick and roll, right? How he can also attack in the pick and roll. I like that a lot. I like what Walker Kessler brings. In Joe Cowley's interview, he also brings out Nikola Jovic as well, not Jokic, Jovic, and Jaden Hardy, who also went after Dalen Terry. Jaden Hardy, who definitely has the scoring potential that Dalen Terry doesn't, right, or has not shown. And then as far as Nikola Jovic, I like him a lot. He's an extremely raw prospect, too. I do think that Bulls fans would also right now be kind of, questioning what his NBA future is like they're doing Dalen Terry. But those are all fair selections. Now, again, this is not to say that Dalen Terry still can't turn into a hell of a player. Actually, in the next segment, we're going to talk about Dalen Terry's Summer League. But, again, another thing that you can point to and say, hey, they didn't necessarily, at least right now on paper. Keep in mind, with all these things that I'm talking about, this is right now with where we stand. A player hits a leap, a player progresses, it could drastically change the outlook of it. And that's why drafts I don't feel like we should write the story completely on drafts 1, 2 years, in some cases even 3, 4 years after a draft selection, because you want to see how they progress over time. Dalen Terry has not gotten to play a lot of NBA minutes. We'll see what he does defensively, but we'll be talking about him in the next segment, so I'm not going to spend a lot on that. And then next up, Julian Phillips. In this year's draft, you traded up, you get Julian Phillips. You didn't have a draft pick. I love the upside. Julian Phillips flashing that shooting. It's still he's shown a lot as far as shooting what he shot from 3-point range, considering that was his biggest problem. The way that he can dunk, the way that he rebounds, especially offensively. I like the Julian Phillips one. But of course, you got Bulls fans like Oscar, who we have a voicemail on, asking, should the Bulls have went with Amani Bates? I actually have a video on that as well. I got videos on everything on this channel, so make sure you guys, if you think of a Bulls concept, I probably got a video on it. But with that said, the Bulls, yes, they have had questions around their drafting, right? And the players that they've drafted have been very raw talents that don't come in and have not really hit the level of progression that we've hoped to see yet. And the Bulls, with a development plan and now hopefully having a development coach, goes a bit further now with the talents they've selected. But I think it's fair to question, hey, is the aspect of how they drafted one of the biggest things holding the Chicago Bulls back so far, right? So, again, I wanted to talk about the article because I thought it was an interesting one, and especially from somebody who I don't even usually like them as a writer, I still thought that was a fairly interesting article. I still say this, let's stop trying to write the stories on players too early on, but there's enough there to say, hey, how different would this Bulls team look, even with the DeMar, the Zach LaVine of it all, things like that, had we made a couple of different decisions on draft night than what we made. Maybe not every single one, but draft nights are always going to be woulda, coulda, shoulda. It's always going to be kind of told in hindsight. And one of those players that we just talked about was Dalen Terry. And so now looking at Dalen Terry and the performance that he gave in Summer League, averaging in Summer League 12.6 points per game, 5 rebounds, 3.6 assists, almost 2 steals per game. That was Dalen Terry's Summer League. And those numbers don't seem too bad for a player that you expect to come off the bench. But again, of course, in Summer League, he was the guy basically for most of those Summer League games. He was outshined by Javon Freeman Liberty. And while I don't think good or bad you should read too much in the Summer League, it's kind of the things that are working on. Dalen Terry's already talked about he was in Summer League to get up shots, to get reps in, right? And so once you hear that, it kind of puts a different perspective on it, I think, in fairness. But there's also enough fairness to worry about his scoring ability. And that's the biggest thing with him. 33% he went from field goal range overall, 34% from three-point range. That's not good enough. Now, Dalen Terry did have this to say. I got here playing defense. My defensive ability hasn't dropped. I definitely like my defense on both marquee players and matchups, talking about Grady Dick and Jake LaRivia. He talked about that. He says, like, he's also said this. I felt like I took the challenge. I feel like that's what gets me on the floor. And then other things keep me on the floor, making the right decisions, hitting open shots, being a good teammate, playing with energy. It's not just one thing. Being versatile keeps you on the floor and makes you a player in this league. And he's not wrong. Everybody doesn't have to score to be an effective player in this league. Hell, we have one on our team in Alex Caruso. Now, I will say this. Dalen Terry has to work on that shot. He's going to get open shots if he plays, because one thing, even in my critique of Billy Donovan as a coach, we generate open looks for players. We do. Now, you had some players that passed up those open looks or just weren't effective shooters, in Javonte Green at times. Alex Caruso passes up shots at times. We generate open shots. And that is why bringing in the players like a Javon Carter, like a Torrey Craig, who are not going to shy away from taking those open shots and probably hit them, could really change the Bulls' offense considerably. But Dalen Terry, Summer League, like, there's enough reason there to be concerned. Now, again, concerned, let's put that in perspective. When I say concerned about Dalen Terry, I mean, hey, how much more does he need to work on that shot? But his role, keep in mind, his role is not going to be scoring. It's just not going to be when he initially gets minutes for this team. But if the Bulls, who do probably need a little bit of a scoring punch at times, especially off the bench, either Kobe has to be way more consistent, kind of offset the lack of scoring that's going to come from a player like Dalen Terry, or the Bulls team has to be one of those teams that gets out in transition, plays well, and gets easy buckets, because Dalen Terry in transition is going to get players like Andre Drummond open. It's going to get easy looks for players like Patrick Williams. It's going to help get Kobe White open at three. That's how he can affect the offense. That shooting was always the rawest thing with him coming into the league, but you would hope to see a little bit more progression on it. I think his shot mechanics have improved, but you need to see a better success rate. And Dalen Terry, it's not wrong to expect a player in their second year to come in to Summer League and kind of look like they're above the competition. As much as Bulls fans have the doubt around Patrick Williams did come into, didn't have my lights on, did come into his second Summer League looking like he was a player in the second season of his career. So, the concern around Dalen is valid in some ways. In some ways, it was a little bit overblown as well. And I think that he's a 21-year-old player and is going into his second year, hasn't even played his second year yet, didn't play a lot of minutes last season. He's still getting up a rookie number of reps. Now, one could say at some point, AK has to draft somebody who has a ready-made skill that you trust, but is Billy Donovan going to draft him, right? But we'll end up seeing. I still think the world of Dalen Terry. I still think he has a hell of an upside as well. We just got to see if that's actually going to come out in Dalen Terry. But all right, let's go ahead and get into the next one. The last topic for today is actually a voicemail. This one's from Oscar.
Hey, it's Oscar here, man. What's going on? Bro, I follow a couple pages on social media, like basketball stuff. There's one specific one, Ball Don't Stop. And he put up a video showing, like, Amani Bates. Man, this kid is the real deal, man. Like I told you when we passed on him, legit 3-level scorer. And after watching all our Summer League games, Julian Phillips, yes, he's an athlete. Yes, he can jump out the gym. Yes, he can scratch his knees standing up. That doesn't make him a basketball player, man. Like, we're still waiting 4 years later for Patrick Williams to make good on the promise of his athletic profile and what he could potentially be 4 years later. Man, I really hope we need that the Bulls start changing their philosophy and their scouting and start looking at legit at basketball players, man. Athletes, basketball players are athletes, but not all athletes are basketball players. Like, how many guys have we seen come in the league, hyped out of college because they could jump out the gym and 360 and all this and never make it, man. Like, I'm telling you, man, I see it. A couple years down the line, we're still gonna be. Julian Phillips is gonna be in the Windy City Bulls working on his jump shot, and Amani Bates is gonna be in the league getting meaningful minutes, scoring 20 a night off the bench, or maybe in a starter role. And we're gonna be asking, man, what if? Like, this to me gives me Draymond vibes, man. Yo, you can't pass up on basketball players for potential for athletes, and that's what I think we did. We passed up on a legit ball player for the potential of an athlete developing into a ball player. And it's just, man, it's crazy to me, man. Let me know what you think.
Okay. Amani Bates and Oscar, here's the thing. There's a lot of Bulls fans like Oscar that literally look at everything. Why are you even a fan of the team? right? That's what I think. Everything can't be raw. Everything can't be hindsight. Amani Bates is a second-round pick who may have trouble getting on the court. Yes, he has a huge scoring upside. Scoring, I get it, especially as casual fans. And again, that's not even to Oscar. That's not used to be derogatory. But scoring is what gets people, casuals, in the game. That's the easy, tangible thing. But we've seen, just like you said, we've seen a lot of scorers who fizzled out and didn't have impacts in the league. Amani Bates has scoring upside, absolutely. But when you look at his lack of size, his lack of creation off the dribble, his once physical NBA defenders get to him, you have to wonder how he's going to get off that shot. Amani Bates didn't have the hugely most efficient summer league either against that level of competition. He did score better than Dalen Terry, absolutely. But there are two sides of basketball. And so ultimately, I get looking at Amani Bates and thinking, hey, why didn't we do this? We're still waiting on Patrick Wood. Like, all that, I hear you. But Amani Bates isn't the surefire thing either. And I would honestly say Julian Phillips has more overall NBA upside because, again, NBA play is more than just one side of the ball. And when you look at Julian Phillips and his ability to shoot that looks like it could round out, I would say this: Julian Phillips as an overall basketball player, defense and offense, to me right now has a higher upside than Amani Bates. I would trust Julian Phillips to figure out his offense more than I would figure out 170-something pound Amani Bates to figure out how to be an effective defender in the NBA. And so, yes, Amani Bates is probably going to score way more points than Julian Phillips. But we've seen scores not, you can put up points. Deion Waiters was one of those and not really impact winning at all, right? You can do that. Hell, we had Ben Gordon here for a long time. Put up some points, was great for this Bulls team. As soon as he went somewhere else, kind of fell off, right? And again, another undersized player that was more height than size. Amani Bates is more size. But all I'm saying is this: Amani Bates still does have tremendous upside. And it could be that the Bulls, you end up looking at, and Amani Bates and Julian Phillips are always going to be compared in some Bulls fans' minds. But here's what I'll say. Right now, we don't know. And I personally, and this isn't just because the Bulls drafted him, with his defensive ability, I would trust Julian Phillips to be an overall better basketball player than Amani Bates right now because of his physical limitations. Julian Phillips, you don't have to worry about the physical aspect of it. Physicality, he got. Defending, he got. Shooting, it looked like he may have it more than what we initially thought. But you have to be able to defend in this league as well. And so, I'm not one of those people who look at somebody just because they're able to score and think, hey, that means they're going to be this huge NBA prospect. We'll end up seeing. Story ain't written on that yet. But make sure you guys follow the show. That's my time for today. Follow the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for our mailbag episodes, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you right if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.